Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining the Catalent webinar series sponsored by our consumer division today. So my name is Patrick Griffin. I'm the GM of our consumer business, which means I work with consumer companies ranging from apparel to luxury goods to food and beverages as they tackle the challenges that a lot of these companies are facing today in terms of changing channels, changing customer tastes, et cetera. So my job here at Catalent is to match up leading companies, Fortune 100 companies, with top thinkers in their field and new and innovative ways to solve problems. So that leads us quite naturally to the two gentlemen that we have on the line today. We've got Afdhel Aziz and Bobby Jones, both of whom have experience at a lot of the working with and working for the top brands in the world. Afdhel has worked at Procter & Gamble. He most recently was at Absolute Labs. Bobby is has worked at Octagon, for brands like Moet and for other kind of global leaders. And I think that really interesting idea. The reason that we have these webinars is to share what we think are really groundbreaking and needle-moving ideas. And what's most interesting lately is that they've written a book called Good is the New Cool. They've developed some workshops around a really innovative way for people to redirect some of the money that they would traditionally channel towards things like print advertising, pay-per-click, you name it, television advertising, towards something that might be completely radically new, and enable them to connect with a new customer base that they haven't been able to connect with before. So both Afdhel and Bobby are very, I hope they don't mind me saying this, they're very cool themselves. They're both experts at reaching out to the millennial community, which is something that I hear all the time when I'm out on the road with clients and at conferences. So without further ado, I just want to pass it over to Afdhel and Bobby to share some of the real business insights that they have and share a playbook for a really unique new way to engage their audience. So over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Pat, and thank you to the Catalent team for hosting us today. We're really happy to be here. Guys, as you go through this, please feel free to send us questions via the GoToWebinar, and we're going to try and do this presentation in about 45 minutes and leave about 50 minutes for questions and comments and things like that as well. Yeah, please send them our way. So this is us on screen, and Bobby and I have been friends for a very long time now. We used to work together at Heineken, and we kind of set out on this common journey of writing a book about 3.5 years ago, and really it was motivated by us as marketers to find more meaningful ways in which to do our job. And we kind of realized that there was this seismic shift happening in culture and in business that we wanted to explore and kind of unpack this idea of how business can be a force for good. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, and give you the 7 principles that we focus on in the book that hold some insight and advice for any brand in any category. What I do now, I've left Absolute Vodka as of January 1st of this year, and I run my own consultancy called Conspiracy of Love, where we help brands figure out this space and how to use the power of culture and technology in order to build purpose-driven brands for the 21st century. And would love to chat more if anybody thinks they have some specific problems or that they're tackling or dealing with. Bobby and I, as Pat mentioned, hold workshops that are brand specific. Really enjoy doing them and coming and helping brands figure out their purpose and how to bring it to life as well. So that's myself. I'm going to hand over to my co-author and friend Bobby to introduce himself.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Bobby Jones. I am currently the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for Peace First, which is a Boston-based nonprofit that is focused on helping young people around the world to compassionately solve injustices. And as was said earlier in our intro, I work for years throughout my whole career has been in youth culture. And for years it was on the brand side, but I was really inspired. I work with young people about this shift in terms of their values and their consciousness of the issues that were happening in the world and their passion for being part of solutions within it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that generational shift and what it means on a macro and market opportunity as well. And so, we started on this journey of writing this book, with this quote that really stood out to us. It was a Mark Twain quote, and he said, "The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why." And it really struck a personal chord with both of us as marketers, as we were really trying to figure out a greater and deeper purpose in the work that we were doing, and connecting that purpose with doing really great and innovative work that was also in some ways impacting the greater good. And we also knew that there were so many marketers that were out there that were trying to do the same. And so with that, we articulated our own purpose as, being an organization and creating a book that would serve world changers, the innovators, provocateurs that believe in business and culture as forces of good, which I'm sure all of you that are joining us today are part of that. And so we started with this purpose, and that really inspired the way that we wrote this book. And we released this book in October of last year, and it really struck a chord with a lot of marketers, and entrepreneurs and culture creators across the country. It debuted as #1 new release on Amazon, and we just have so many conversations every day in person and via social media with people who are really trying to figure out how to find greater meaning in their work and connect with this generation of people in really relevant and powerful ways. And so, we were really struck by this idea of being a part and in the middle of this really exciting shift. And so it led us to the first of several questions which we explore in the book, which is what is happening around us. And so the first thing that we saw when we were looking at what was happening around us was that there was this new wave of brands that were doing well by doing good. The Patagonias, the Cons, the Zappos, the Teslas, the Methas, the Warby Parkers of the world. And one of the things that really stood out to us was not just that they were in the business of impacting the social good, but they were actually the brands that everybody wanted. So everybody wanted a pair of Warby Parker glasses, the car people wanted to drive with Teslas. People wanted a Patagonia coat because of what it stood for, but also because it was a great piece of apparel. And so there's this idea that there were these new waves of entrepreneurs that were creating models in which they were impacting the social good through their business and finding ways of being very profitable by doing it. But as we looked deeper beyond that, we saw that it wasn't just limited to the entrepreneurial space in these upstarts. We were seeing that the Unilevers of the world, for example, these large multinational corporations, were seeing the same thing. And if you look at Unilever just as an example, 4 quick facts. I mean, their sustainable living brands grown faster than they did, 3 years ago. They're still on the upswing. They delivered nearly half of Unilever's growth, which is huge from a retail standpoint. They grew significantly faster than the rest of the business, the brands. And the brands that they're doing are household brands. I mean, these are the Doves, the Liptons, the Hellmans, Dirty Good. Like, these are household brands. And so even as we look even beyond how these huge multinationals were doing and being part of kind of social change, we started to see on a cultural level that the people that really drive what's cool in popular culture were also becoming much more vocal in terms of their activism. We've seen this really interesting shift where the fans of celebrities and athletes are really interested in who they are beyond just entertainers and athletes, who they are, on stage or in film or what have you, and they really want to know who they are in terms of what they care about. And so you see artists like Beyonce, who, in the past has gotten a lot of criticism for not being outspoken enough, becoming very vocal through her art and her stage performances and so forth in terms of causes around justice and women's equality and all of these other things. And Lady Gaga through the Born This Way Foundation and her work to create a braver kind of world, and LeBron James through his activism in terms of creating education opportunities for young people and being outspoken in terms of racial equality and injustice as it relates to police and other areas. And so there's this shift that's happening where the architects of cool are increasingly becoming activists in the social space. And then, you look at, these shifts in terms of brands really going into this space and celebrities really going into this space. What was really interesting was that even in the space that, I live in now, in the nonprofit space, you're seeing nonprofits playing a much greater role in terms of developing innovative, really cool, exciting campaigns that are bringing the power of brands and the power of celebrities to amplify their message and activities. And you see this through the Golden Citizens Festival in New York, which is one of the biggest festivals in the city and one of the most exciting festivals in the country, which is all about celebrating the power of people as citizens to change the world and create a more just world. Charity Water is doing some of the most innovative work in terms of using virtual reality to share the stories of what's happening around the world in the water crisis. And Pencils of Promise and using the power of celebrities from Scooter Braun and so many others to be able to show, the role that celebrities and brands can play and actually solve and partner with nonprofits to solve real problems. And so it's this real interesting shift where the boldness of nonprofits is really connecting well with the social consciousness of celebrities and brands. And so it's creating this really interesting convergence where we talk about between commerce, conscious, and culture, where who we are as citizens and what we believe to be right and just in the world is affecting what we buy and the people and individuals, entertainment, and artists that we pay attention to from a cultural standpoint. And so it's creating this really interesting phenomenon, which we branded as good, becoming the new cool, where at the heart of this convergence is the idea that all of these forces combining for a greater good has become the thing that is really right within kind of the zeitgeist of our culture right now.
So once Bobby and I kind of spotted what was happening, it prompted us to ask a second question, which was, why was this happening now? We really broke it down to three key drivers, and we call them the kind of generational, technological, and spiritual. The generational is really around Millennials and Generation Z and the expectations they have of the brands in their lives. The technological is caused by the massive disruption that's happening to the traditional advertising model. And the spiritual is what we call the crisis of meaningfulness amongst the people who work in marketing and advertising communities. If some of you who may be on the call today as well. So let's start with the generational. First of all, we know that when it comes to choosing places to work, Millennials and Gen Z have much higher expectations of their employers. 64% of them won't take a job if their employee doesn't have a strong CSR plan. And 85% of them believe that companies have an obligation to help solve social problems, an obligation, which is really interesting. So we say to the companies we speak to, if you want to future-proof your business in terms of attracting the right talent for the next two generations, you better make sure that you have a very clear purpose and social mission baked into what you do. From a consumer perspective, this stat really caught our eye. Globally, millennials have an annual spending power of $2.5 trillion, and 95% of them would switch brands to one that supported a good cause. So it shows you the enormous economic opportunity of aligning your brand with the right cause and the right idea. It's summed up really by this quote. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise coming in. Can somebody mute their phone? Thanks. So it's really summed up by this quote from this writer, Ann Lapper. Every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world you want. These guys are voting with their wallets, and that's why you're seeing brands like Tom's, Warby Parker, and Tesla, Patagonia really rise to the forefront as being the new wave of brands that everybody is focused on. The second thing that's happening is the impact of technology, and the analogy we use is the same disruption that happened in the music business, 10 or 15 years ago when Napster came along and completely shattered the notions of how music was consumed. that same disruption is happening in the advertising model as well. So to take one example of ad blocking, which is a huge issue right now in the space. This is the global adoption curve of ad blockers up to last year. 275 million people who no longer want to see ads on their phones, laptops, or desktops. When you couple that with the massive penetration of people shifting to streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and HBO, which have no ads, you suddenly see it become really difficult for marketers to reach consumers using conventional advertising. In fact, a recent stat came out that said 82% of kids in Netflix-only homes don't even know what a TV ad is. So all of that really begs the question, if marketing and advertising is about producing advertising, what happens when there is nobody left to actually see it? And that, we really think, feeds in neatly into the third driver for this, which is this crisis of meaningfulness that we're seeing in the marketing and advertising communities. That was certainly the catalyst for Bobby and I to start writing the book. But when we talked to our friends and peers, we realized we weren't alone. And this statistic from Adobe, a survey that Adobe did, really caught our eye. So when they asked people what the 4 least valuable professions to society were, marketing and advertising were in the top 4. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you look at the blue 13%, that represents general consumers. Yellow represents people who work in marketing and advertising. So what that signaled to us, that there was a deep issue with what people saw as the meaningfulness of the work that they did in this space, which is leading them to really reconsider what they do. And our mission really with this presentation is to say, don't quit your day job. There is a way to do marketing and advertising in a way that is completely in line with positive social values, that is also really successful and helps build brands and drive revenue as well. Our friend Jeff Benjamin, who's a world-class creative, has this really great analogy. He talks about watching the movie Deep Impact, which is about an asteroid hitting the Earth, and he's looking at the scene where they're taking the best of the Earth, the doctors, the scientists, the engineers, and putting them into a mountain shelter to protect them from the asteroid. And his epiphany at that moment was, well, they're probably not going to be asking many advertising creatives to go in there. And so he posed this really interesting question to us, which is, how do we do work that gets us into the mountain? And hopefully today, as we run through some of these principles, they'll help hopefully spark some ideas for the work that you do as well. So I'm going to hand over to Bobby to talk about the new models.
And so, as I said, the analogy, we're really interested in who are the people that were creating the new models? Who were the people that, using that analogy, who were the people that were doing the type of work that would get them in the mountain, so that their value to humanity was clear and meaningful. And so we set on this journey to find these people, some of which we knew. And so we actually started out with, the vision of talking maybe 5 to 7 of these people. But the more people we talked to, the more people were saying that we needed to meet this next person or this next person or this next person. And so we wound up talking to over 24 people and interviewing them. And the thing that I will point out about this group is that they run the gamut. They're for-profit, they're non-profit, they're entrepreneurial startups. These are executives at huge multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporations. Some of them, work with communities that you probably have ignored and never paid attention to, and some of them work with the largest, biggest, most famous celebrities in the world. So there really is no limit to the types of places where people can make this type of impact. But there were 7 things that we really learned from this group that we really structured the stories and and kind of the model around. And it starts with knowing your purpose, the importance of knowing your why. Why do you care about this on a personal level, and knowing your purpose on an organizational level was something that was consistently at the forefront of everything that the people were doing. The second is, as they were clear about their purpose, it became much more clear for them to find their allies, the other people in the space that believe in what they believe and want to accomplish what they want to accomplish. The next is being able to think citizens and not consumers, and being able to connect with people, not just in terms of what they buy or what they consume, but in terms of who they are and what they value, what are their passions, what are the problems that they have in their lives, and what are the things and ways that brands can help solve them and help optimize their lives. The next one is leading with the cool, being able to do things and package things and introduce the ideas and offerings in ways that make people really pay attention, tap it into pop culture in all of its forms. The fifth is don't advertise solve problems. It's not enough to just try to reach and interrupt people. It's really about how do you solve problems in the world that makes them really pay attention to what you're doing. And if you're able to do that effectively, you'll earn what we call the holy grail in marketing, which is advocacy, which is so important because that sixth lesson is the people are the new media, and their ability to talk about and evangelize your product or your offering is so important in the ways that people go to learn about different offerings and campaigns. And then last but not least is the importance of backing up the promise with the proof. As you say, this is what you care about, this is what your purpose is for, being able to back that up with the actual proof of your actions on a day-to-day basis.
So we're going to work through each of these and give you examples of some of the people we talk to as we go through it. And as Bobby said, the first and most fundamental is knowing your purpose. And this applies really on two levels, the personal and the organizational. So number one is knowing why you, as an individual, exist, what your higher order purpose is, and what you're here to do, and making sure that it then aligns with your organizational purpose. Because if it's not aligned, that's when a lot of stress can occur if you're not in sync. And from a brand and organizational purpose, the higher order reason, more than just making a profit, that you exist, the way you actually add value to society, knowing that is crucial in this day and age. In fact, we say purpose is the fifth P of marketing. In the traditional 4Ps model, you had price, product, place, and promotion. We think that purpose is the fifth P that should underpin all four of the others. Because if you don't know why you exist as a company, how do you know what product to make and what price and who to sell it to and where to promote it as well? And increasingly, we see that, again, in terms of going back to the recruitment piece, people want to work at companies that have a higher order purpose. And this quote from, it's rare that you see Biggie Smalls in a business presentation, but this caught our eye. He had this great quote from the movie Notorious: "Don't chase the paper, chase the dream." What you have to do is show people the dream of what this company that you're asking them to be part of is there to do. And that's how you actually get loyalty and people trying to do the best work of their lives. One person that we talked to who had been really thinking about how his own personal purpose intersected with that of his organization was Scooter Braun, who manages Justin Bieber, manages Kanye West, and has built this amazingly successful business around TV, film, music, multimedia, in creating properties that are at the forefront of pop culture. And he had really spent a lot of time thinking about his own personal purpose, which he expressed as wanting to leave a positive impact through his family and his work. So his purpose is actually to help the people around him, whether they're his artists or whether the people who work for his organization or his family, achieve their best. And he found a great amount of fulfillment in that. And I think that's testimony to his success, that he's able to really think about how he is of service and how his organization is really of service to those people around him as well.
And so the next one, as you're clear about what your purpose is, the ability to find your allies, particularly in this day and age where there's so many people and citizens around the country who are very vocal about what they care about. There's so many celebrities that are vocal about what they care about, and brands are increasingly being called to be very open about what they care about. It's a great time to be able to find the other people and partners and organizations out here that you share a kindred set of beliefs and values or goals with, and find ways to really partner with them in innovative ways. One of the people that was one of the, we believe was one of the pioneers in really looking at this kind of, this model for how business, pop culture, and our profits can come together to really solve problems in the world was Jennifer Willick. Jennifer was the first CMO of RED, which is the organization founded by Bono and others. And, you know, her whole thing was, the thing that she learned early on was that you can have a clear purpose and a common vision. It's so much easier to be able to find partners. And they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars through those types of partnerships. Now Jennifer Willick is the founder of Whole World Water. And, you know, she is doing something that's really innovative at Whole World Water. And what she's doing, and her allies in this search to solve the water crisis around the world, she's found allies in the tourism industry. And she's also partnered with Richard Branson to also be part of this. And her model is pretty simple. You know, a hotel or restaurant that joins the global marketing campaign of Whole World Water, you know, once they join that, they have access to all the collateral of the Whole World Water network. And then the second step is that they agree to provide still a sparkling water to their guests in these beautifully designed glasses that are designed by Aziz Behar that the network, the Worldwide Water platform provides. You know, the third step is that they agree to give, they provide the water within these beautiful vessels, and that they agree to give 10% of the proceeds from every bottle sold to the Whole World Water Fund. And 100% of that money is used to fund clean and safe water initiatives around the world. And so this is, you know, a really innovative model that she and her partners were able to create. And her big takeaway was that there's so many models out there, whether you're a retail brand or a luxury brand, that haven't been thought of as yet. So for those of us in the business of innovation and creating new models and looking to really excite in marketplaces and advocates, it's a great time to really discover and really test new models for how to do so.
So the third principle when thinking about how you approach the space is think citizens, not consumers. We think that if you think about somebody as only a consumer of your product, you're reduced to having a very transactional, one-dimensional relationship with them. But if you think about them as people who are citizens with a wide range of interests and passions and causes, then you're able to have a multi-dimensional relationship with them and really start to think about how you as a brand can fit into their lives over and above that very kind of one-dimensional transactional approach. A great example of this is the work done by the paint brand Dulux. And we spoke to Fernando Romano, who was the creative director on this project called Let's Color. So Dulux, the paint brand's purpose was to add color to people's lives. They realized that color meant optimism, meant energy. And what they did in terms of finding their allies was turn to neighborhoods and communities around the world and say to them, hey, if you need help in brightening up a part of your community, a car park, a neighborhood center, a street, let us give you free paint. The catch was the neighborhood had to come together to actually do the painting itself. And the Let's Color project to date have done over 1,200 projects around the world in every single continent. And what it's done is allow a paint brand to enter the lives and communities of people in a really powerful way by thinking about them as citizens, not consumers. And Fernando's point with this quote, if people weren't part of it, they had no ownership of it, really speaks to the fact that when you're designing these initiatives, make sure you give people something to do. That allows them to engage that part of themselves. And in that participation and engagement, that's really where the relationship with the brand can flourish and thrive. The people walking down the street, remembering the day of painting that they had that made that street brighter, are going to remember the brand that helped them do it much more clearly and deeply than any billboard or out-of-home advertising ever could. So it really speaks to the power of being able to do something that's totally different in order to make that emotional connection with people.
And as you're able to, create these things, one of the things that we heard over and over again was the power of leading with the cool. And we say that, the things that make people pay attention, whether it's beautiful design, whether it's partnering with an artist or a celebrity, that can draw attention, the things that make people really want to lean forward and pay attention to what it is, but also share it and advocate for it and participate in it. And so one of the people that we spoke with, which is the partner of the gentleman here, Pharrell, is Mimi Valdez. And Mimi Valdez is the Chief Creative Officer for I Am Mother, which is a creative platform for Pharrell. So everything that you see associated with Pharrell, from his music to his fashion to his collaborations with brands, all of it is part of the I Am Mother portfolio. And Mimi is the Chief Creative Officer of that. And one of the things that, that Mimi spoke about was that there was a real sort of clarity about what they stand for in I Am Mother, which is, they know that they stand for individuality. And people expect new ideas from us, things that haven't been done before. They expect that innovation. They expect breakthrough design and really innovative campaigns. And you can see how they've delivered on that, from everything from Pharrell's, partnerships with Adidas to the groundbreaking 24-hour video for Happy years ago, to so many things that Pharrell was doing. But there was one particular thing that Mimi was working on. We were talking with her about this book, and she was saying that she had just recently had a meeting with the producer, Donna Gigliotti, who is an Oscar-winning producer, and Donna had just gotten the rights to a screenplay that she was calling Hidden Figures. And immediately, Mimi knew that story needed to be told, and immediately, because of the clarity in terms of what they wanted to do, and I Am Mother's core purpose, that they could add things to it that would make it a really incredible and piece of a part of a broader cultural conversation. And so, they partnered with, on the Hidden Figures project, and, the rest is history. Is gone on to be nominated for Oscar awards, and it was the #1 movie in the country. And it's been this amazing story. Now, in the past, stories like that, they could have very easily been a PBS documentary, or it could have been something that was just shown on Black History Month. But through the partnership with I Am Mother, it became something that was really a part of the broader pop cultural conversation. The soundtrack was one of the best-selling ones. It had a beautiful cinematography. It had, Hollywood stars, and it was all these things that really made it relevant to a broader audience. And so, leading with the cool, it gives, so even with the best causes and the most specific social issues, it makes it so much more appealing to a broader audience when you connect it to popular culture.
Absolutely. And that neatly leads us on to the next principle we have, which is somewhat provocatively titled Don't Advertise, Solve Problems. And the idea really here is, if you go back and look at what we've been saying, if you know your purpose as a brand, you're thinking about people as citizens, not consumers, then the next logical step is to think about how you as a brand can fit into their lives and help them solve problems. And we say in the book, brands should solve problems from the everyday to the epic. Now, a lot of the time when you think about this space, you think about brands needing to tackle the most epic problems of the world: social justice, climate change, inequality. But we say there's an equal amount of work to be done in just helping people with the everyday stresses and conflicts of daily life. Now, a great example of this is a piece of work that our friend Marco Vega, who you see on screen here, his agency We Believers did with a brand called Saltwater Brewing in Florida. Saltwater is a very small craft brewer, but they're passionate about ocean conservancy. And they gave Marco and his team a brief, which is really around tackling one of the problems prevalent in the beer industry, which is the problem of plastic six-pack rings, the things that hold a six-pack together, which are notorious for being really bad for marine life, strangling animals and birds, causing a huge amount of the plastic waste that you see in the oceans. And Marco and his team, when thinking about how best to tackle this problem, they came up with a really deceptively simple idea where they said, well, why don't we take the waste products that are used in the production of beer, the barley, the wheat, the maize, and use it to create edible six-pack rings. So these are six-pack rings which have the tensile strength enough to be able to hold a six-pack, but which are not only biodegradable, they're actually edible by marine life as well. So they dissolve in 30 days, and even if they didn't dissolve in 30 days, fish could actually eat them. And this little idea catapulted saltwater brewing to public consciousness last summer when they announced it. The agency won a bunch of Cannes Lions off the back of it. And more importantly, every single major brewer in the beer business reached out to them and said that they'd like to use the technology too. So these are some of the biggest beer companies in the world, like Anheuser-Busch or SAB Miller or the Heineken companies as well. And so it really created this ripple effect from this small idea that generated more publicity than any banner ad or billboard ever could. But it generally also solved a problem that was prevalent in the world today. And Marco's quote is really powerful. We are facing an era when humanity will shed those brands whose products do not solve the need. So the next time you're thinking about how to design an initiative, think about what problems you could solve in people's lives.
And so, you know, this next one is something that so many of us in marketing and in media are clearly being affected by this shift where, you know, people are in the media, and we can no longer buy our way into people's conversations. We have to earn it. We have to earn it by creating things that are remarkable and that are valuable and that are real and that are authentic and actually solve a real problem in people's lives. And so one of the people that we talked to was, you know, Jah Johnson. And Jah has an interesting story. He's been in the music industry for years. He told us this story when he was starting out as an intern at LaFace Records, and he was talking with the person who became his mentor, L.A. Reid. And Jah was young, and he was very become very frustrated with the type of music that he was being asked to market. He asked L.A. Reid. He said, "Well, if you don't like the music that you're being, you know, tasked with selling, what do you do?" And L.A. Reid told him, he said, "Well, you know, in the music industry, there's basically two key roles. You're either the person that makes the music or you're the person that sells it. He said everything in between is pretty much administrative." And he said, if you don't like what you're selling, then you should be on the creative side. You should begin to try to influence what's being created. And it really resonated with Jah, and it really kind of touched on his insight and thing that he really believed, that his music has a way of shining a light on what's going on now in a way that no speech, no book, no historian can do. And he's spent his career helping and working with artists such as Usher, Common, and Mary J. Blige to create music that matters and to create music that really solves problems in the world and really inspires people in really important ways. And I think that, you know, the thing that he, I think really showed us through his story is that, you know, so often as marketers, you know, we're tasked with marketing, selling things we don't really believe in, and we oftentimes wonder why people don't believe in them either. And so, you know, one of the things that he really stressed, that I think was really important, is if you don't believe in something, then try to find ways to be part of creating things that you do believe in, that you do believe can play a role in optimize people's lives and play a meaningful part in it. And if you do that with authenticity, and you do that with genuine intent, and you're able to create things that really do impact people's lives, then you earn that advocacy, and you turn those people into the media that you need in order to really drive awareness and engagement around your offering, a product or a service.
And the final principle really is back up the promise with the proof. So we added this because we noticed that there were a lot of brands who were kind of taking their first steps into this space, and usually the first step takes the form of advertising. It takes the form of a brand campaign where a brand will espouse a particular value or an idea, and kudos to them for doing it and using the power of storytelling to bring it up. But very quickly afterwards, unless a brand moves to then take some tangible action, to put some investment, to put their money where their mouth is to solve that problem, you frequently have this situation where people can accuse them of just doing it for empty rhetoric. That's where the danger of brand washing could exist. One brand who does a really great job of backing up the promise with the proof is Tom's Shoes. So this is Blake, who's the founder of Tom's, you see in the picture, and this is the shoe donation trips that they do because of their one-for-one model. When they go into developing countries and hand out shoes, they always make sure to create films and content around that to go back and show people the impact of the work that they did. Another person who's done a really great job of backing up the promise with the proof is Lady Gaga, and we had the pleasure of speaking to Bobby Campbell, who is the gentleman to Gaga's right, standing there, who is her manager, and who has really masterminded a lot of the brand partnerships that she's done, whether it's with brands like Mattel or Dell, and I had the pleasure of working with them, and Gaga partnered with Absolute Vodka. And really, the idea is that as an artist, Gaga has both moral imagination as well as a creative imagination. So the moral imagination is this idea of being able to see the world as it should be, or as she thinks it should be. And you see this right throughout her career, where she has championed causes like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, marriage equality. She used the platform of the Oscars to talk about sexual assault. She has fearlessly used her capital as an artist and backed it up with the proof of her commitment to these causes as well. And she does a great job of doing that. And Bobby had this quote: when you're being a revolutionary, a pioneer, actually trying to change the world, you're going to piss people off. And that's okay. That's part of the provocativeness of Gaga's brand. And that's kind of the reason that other brands come to her, because they do see her as this kind of pioneering figure in this space as well. So it's really important to make sure that once you get into this space, you're not just espousing a value, but you're backing it up with action as well.
And so our last part is, why is this important? Is very often we get asked the question, how do you make a business case for using the power of business and culture for greater good? And we'll show you just real quickly 4 key stats that really, I think, show the importance of it. The first is, if you are responsible for driving brand strength, social activism is a strong driver for that. So if you look at the top, the leading drivers for it, being on the leading edge within a category is a key part of it, but social activism is right beneath that. And so if you're responsible for brand health and for being a good steward of the brand and making sure that you have a brand that is relevant and really remarkable, social activism is a key way of doing that. The second is, not only does it build brand strength, but also builds wealth. If you look at the S&P index and you look at the performance of them, socially responsible brands are significantly outpacing. If you look at the trend, the gap is growing. So even if you're looking at it through a shareholder lens, social responsibility is a great way of continuing to drive both revenue and overall wealth. Next is this idea that, when you look at the lifespan of an organization, as Afdhel said before, organizations that don't solve problems will quickly be replaced by those that do, and the marketplace will be shedding those brands that are not solving it. Part of what we're seeing right here is evidence of that in terms of the lifespan of organizations shrinking from 67 years to 15 years. And so if you want to be able to be a brand that has a longer lifespan and a business that has a much more durability and lasting power, one of the most important ways to do that, in addition to having a solid business model, is having a business model that is connected to actually solving problems in people's lives. We become an indispensable part of who they are and what they value in their day-to-day activities.
And really the final stat that we found powerful was a slide from Professor Michael Porter, who talked about where the resources are. And the answer was kind of surprising. If you look at revenue by stakeholder, nonprofits in the United States have $1.2 trillion, government has $3.1 trillion, and corporations have $20.1 trillion. So think about that and the potential to do a tremendous amount of good in the world today. And our message is really, if you work on one of those brands inside one of those corporations, or advise them through being an agency or consultancy, there's a tremendous amount of positive impact you can make in your day job if you're able to figure out a way to help the brands you work on find purpose and really add value to people's lives as well. And so really our final thought is about thinking transformationally, not transactionally. And we have a quick checklist that we're going to go through to leave you with some final thoughts in terms of how you can now take all of these insights and apply them to your day job. Bobby?
Yeah, so the first one is the importance of finding your allies. We spoke a little bit about that earlier. Finding the people within your organization that can help that can help you bring your ideas and your values within the organization to life externally. So many of these things started with small teams of people sitting around a conference room table, really imagining what a bolder brand can do. The second is start with what you have. Don't worry about not having all the resources, everything that you need. The third is clarity follows action. Even if you don't know the full vision for the way that the organization can play a role, just get started where you are and where you can. Don't feel brand washing. Sometimes companies get caught up in being fearful that their organization doesn't necessarily have the credibility and so forth to play in a particular space and just doing so for a halo effect. But don't fear that. If your intentions are strong, your intentions are clear, then you can do that. Next, respect the proportion. If you're spending $30,000 on an initiative to create impact in the world and spend $1 million to promote it, those proportions are out of whack. Practice the golden rule. Don't create anything for communities that you wouldn't want for yourself. Add some good to the brief for those of us that are in the business of creating briefs or responding to briefs, particularly for those that create it. If you can add some good or make impact in a greater good part of the brief, it can go a long way in terms of transforming the ideas. 8, share your work, share your progress, share your struggles and your successes with others that are trying to figure it out. And then 9, pay it forward as you learn, whether it's through these webinars, whether it's through the book, whether it's through any of the things that you're exposed to. Pay those things forward to the people around you.
And really, the final thought is now it's up to you guys. This is really what Bobby and I set out to do with the book, and that's why we do webinars like this. That's why we do workshops and through the consultancy and everything else. It's really helping people like you figure out how to take what they do in their day jobs and find a way to make it more meaningful and add more positive social impact in the world. So we're here if you need to ask us questions. Let's open it up for questions right now on the webinar as well. And as always, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or social media if you have specific things that you'd like to chat with us. I believe we're also going to make this whole webinar available for free, so you guys can listen to it afterwards, share it with your fellow allies if you'd like to, and provide this the presentation as well. So I think I'll hand back to Pat or Jeff and open it up for questions.
Yeah, that was fantastic, guys, and we really fully on board that if we put some marketers in the mountain, you guys will be the first to. I mean, this idea of creating more meaning through marketing, through advertising is really powerful. But so let's imagine that I'm a brand that hasn't done anything like this. How do I wrap my head around the idea of solving a problem? In terms of don't advertise, solve a problem. How do I narrow down which problem that I solve, and how do I not get caught up in what my particular customer value proposition is? How close does it need to be to the problem that my product solves in a more direct way?
It's a great question, actually. So I think it's easier to think about it in terms of there's the product experience and then there's the marketing experience. And first of all, your product experience may be solving problems in and of themselves. If you're a pair of running shoes, you're solving the problem of helping people exercise better. If you are a water bottle, you're helping people stay hydrated. So there's a natural fit with figuring out how your product experience then leads to the marketing experience around it as well. And what we mean by that is instead of defaulting to that marketing experience being advertising, which we see as a rapidly eroding way of building a relationship. What we say is that really marketing experiences should be either physical or digital experiences that are at the intersection of useful or delightful. So if you take the example of a pair of running shoes, for example, Nike do amazing running events where they bring communities together, they bring cities and neighborhoods together, and bring communities of runners together through products like Nike Plus. By actually creating physical experiences through things like the Nike 10K runs or digital experiences like the Nike Plus platform, what they're doing is building a relationship of loyalty and trust with their consumers who are now coming to them not just because they have a great pair of running shoes, but because the brand experience around the product is genuinely adding value to their lives, giving them community, giving them access to challenging themselves in all new.
Sure.
So it's important to think about the adjacencies to your product experience that you can naturally pivot to in order to create these marketing experiences.
Awesome. And one other question that I had as I listened to this is, again, thinking of it from a novice perspective, what if being cool or being socially aware, socially active just isn't a part of my brand today and the way that I communicate with consumers today? Like, I think to your point about brand washing, I think people will feel a risk of like, well, if we're not traditionally cool, how do I do this without seeming inauthentic or seeming like I'm following the crowd? What advice would you have to a marketing team that felt that way?
Well, I mean, I think in this day and age, I mean, if you are an organization with employees, if you're an organization with customers, if you're part of local communities where your business operates, if you have distributors and retailers in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, and your supply chain and all those things are connected to other communities, it's going to be increasingly hard to not have any sense of care or concern or interest in the well-being of any of those stakeholders, because increasingly they all are being more and more conscious and outspoken about their quality of life, the quality of life of people around them, and who are the people that are either enhancing and optimizing their lives, or who are the people in the brands and institutions that are causing harm to those organizations and lives. And so, even if you are an organization that hasn't been particularly involved in issues before, I think it's a great opportunity to at least find out what are the issues that the people that work with you and for you care about, and what are the issues that your customers care about, and find ways to at least acknowledge and support those issues in ways that connect to who you are as a business and what your values are. And so I think that the expectation, I think, is changing in the sense that I think people are much more curious about, as we said earlier, every dollar that the people are spending now, they look at as a vote of the type of world that they want to live in. And so increasingly they want to know who are they voting for with the dollars that they spend. And so I would always encourage, start with doing some initial due diligence just in terms of what are the issues that care to the people that are most important to the organization. What are the ways in which the company can support those in ways that are consistent with the values of the organization? And then, I think going back to, finding your allies and, different models, there's so many different ways and examples that you can borrow from in terms of how to do it. But I think those first two steps of understanding you do have some sort of responsibility, and if you ask the right questions, you can find out what are the ways that people want you to be involved. I think those are two key steps that can lead to being successful in the next phases of it.
Awesome. And one final question. As a numbers guy, as a consultant, I always want to understand the ROI and things like that. So as you guys look ahead into the future, obviously advertising spending on things like paid media, we're talking about really big budgets. So if I'm a CMO, how do you see the mix shifting? Like what proportion of my budget might be going towards, following this playbook versus following a more traditional paid media playbook?
It's a great question, Pat. I mean, we see globally there's around $2 trillion that gets spent on media and advertising, by brands globally. And what we're seeing is there's a spectrum where the more enlightened brands, a lot of whom we talk to, are realizing that the writing is on the wall for putting that money into conventional media channels. And you're starting to see, new issues crop up. With some of the channels like programmatic buying, for example, where brands don't know where their money is being spent. And as you're now seeing, brands are realizing that sometimes money is being spent in places which are completely antithetical to their brand values. So there's one point of crisis which is around the lack of accountability as you kind of move to this more automated space. There's another one which is the whole area around fraud and not being able to know exactly where your clicks and impressions are coming from because of this kind of dark pool that occurs around people kind of gaming the system, especially in the digital space, to kind of make money off these automated exchanges without giving marketers and advertisers the transparency and accountability that they're looking for as well. So you're starting to see these kind of structural problems occur in the conventional model. And what we're seeing is the smarter brands, the more progressive brands, they're the ones who are realizing that the new approach needs to be around, number one, creating useful and delightful experiences, whether that's platforms like Nike Plus, or creating content that people genuinely want to engage with. Because if you find something that's truly remarkable and useful, people will share it with other people, and no ad blocker in the world can defeat that. And I think what you're seeing now is the rise of new metrics, which allow people to actually link the amount of good a brand is doing to their business success, sometimes negatively, as we saw with the Delete Uber campaign. But I think you're also seeing it positively in terms of there is a faster method of holding a brand accountable, and that having a direct impact on the bottom line of a brand. So I think the short answer to the long answer I'm giving is there's going to have to be some new metrics where you're measuring not just return on investment, but return on purpose and return on how all the social good a brand is doing is creating long-term fans and advocates and loyalty of a brand. And all I know for sure is that the old metrics aren't going to be enough. And there's a whole exciting challenge ahead as you start to kind of define this new investment model and how it affects these brands.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, let me thank Afdhel, Bobby. Thank you so much for the time today. We are at our hour, but we look forward to continuing the conversation. As we mentioned, you guys can be found at Conspiracy of Love, and we will make sure that people who come to the Catalent site and find this webinar, know how to get in touch with you guys to continue to explore all these issues. And we thank you for joining. We thank the attendees for joining to tackle some of these really cutting-edge issues in how we market and how we connect with our audiences. So thank you, gentlemen, a lot. And thanks so much to our audience for joining.
Thanks for having us. We really enjoyed it.